had to teach my daughter that a knock on the door was something to fear.
Hello everyone. This video is adapted from a true story. At the end of the video, you will see music and music videos inspired by this event. Please subscribe and leave your story. We may adapt your story and make it into an original music video. We left at 3 in the morning. My wife wrapped our daughter tightly in an old wool blanket. She was fast asleep, her face peaceful, completely unaware that we were about to say goodbye to every life we had ever known. We didn't cry that night, and there was no time for goodbyes. We just quietly left our family's only cross necklace inside the house. Hanging on a nail in the wall, 'twas our last prayer for our home. The road to America was far more brutal than we could have ever imagined. The truck was like a cattle car, all bare metal and sweltering heat. On every stretch of the road, a child was vomiting or an old person was fainting. When we reached northern Mexico, the driver went quiet and we knew we were close to the border. That night, when we were shoved into an immigrant channel between bushes and rocks, the guide left us with one sentence. "You are on your own now." We walked in the desert for 2 days and 2 nights. There was no road, only endless sand dunes and the taste of our own cracked lips. My wife carried our daughter the whole way. Her ankles were swollen like dough, her face pale. When I handed her the last small bottle of water we had, she didn't drink it. She just carefully dripped a few drops onto our daughter's lips. The child's lips were split, and she coughed, whispering, "Mama, I am so cold." But it was 120 degrees outside. On the second night, I almost broke. I was carrying our daughter, my legs felt like they were about to snap, and I fell to my knees, gasping for air. I looked at the reddish glow of the Border Patrol tower in the distance. That light, which once represented hope, now felt like a prison wall, reminding me, "Who are you? You don't belong here." But we made it, on pure will, and one prayer after another. The night we got into Los Angeles, I was sitting in the corner of the smuggler's van, my head resting against the cold metal wall. I was humming a lullaby from our hometown, watching my wife hold our sleeping child. I'd never seen a streetlight so bright or the candy in a convenience store window look so beautiful. I quietly took my wife's hand and traced a single word into her palm with my finger. "Arrived?" She let out a soft laugh. That laugh is one of the clearest memories of my entire life. We slept our first night on the kitchen floor of a family from our hometown, with rice sacks and towels, 4 pillows, and a water stain on the peeling ceiling above us. But that night, we slept deeper and sweeter than ever before. When I woke before dawn, I saw my wife was still smiling in her sleep, our daughter breathing softly against her chest. I looked out the window at the first light of day and repeated to myself over and over, "We made it through. We're finally in heaven." Life at first was poor, but it was like a piece of candy so sweet it stung your tongue, teeth hurt, but you couldn't help but savor every bit of it. I worked 2 jobs at a restaurant, from washing dishes in the back to unloading trucks at night. Every Saturday, I'd take the small stack of cash I'd earned, hold it tight in my fist all the way home, and let my wife decide which part we could spend and which part we had to save. I'll never forget the first time she took our daughter to the supermarket to buy ice cream. She held our daughter's hand so tightly, and they stood in front of the freezer for a long time, carefully choosing. In the end, she only bought one, but the way she carried it home, you would have thought she was holding all the light in the world. Every time I came home, my daughter would run and jump on me, saying in her still learning English, "Dad, you are home." She had no idea what that word meant to me. She had no idea how many times I hid in the bathroom and cried, just because she called me Dad. Back then, I truly believed we had already climbed all of life's mountains. But then, after Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris in the November 2024 presidential election and returned to the White House, a cloud of terror fell over the lives of undocumented immigrants like us. The Los Angeles City Council immediately declared the city a sanctuary city to try and protect us. But Trump administration officials had already warned that sanctuary cities like LA would be targeted in immigration crackdowns. Soon enough, in May 2025, the administration began its strategy of workplace force-filled deportation raids. When I heard that news, my heart sank. 'Twas meant that harsher roundups were coming. In early June, the nightmare became real. A friend told me that on the morning of the 6th of June, ICE agents descended on the fashion district in downtown Leh, raiding a wholesale clothing store and a nearby Home Depot, and arrested over 100 immigrants on the spot. Hearing that terrifying number sent a chill down my spine. So many of those arrested were just like me. Ordinary fathers and mothers trying to find work to support their families. They hadn't committed any crime. Yet they were hauled away like criminals at dawn by armed agents. I thought we'd be safer in a big city, but the news reported that as of the 7th of June, 18 undocumented immigrants had been arrested in Los Angeles. That cold number plunged me into despair. It felt like a sword was hanging over our heads, and our family could be the next target at any moment. After that, my daily life became more cautious and suffocating than ever before. I barely dared to step outside. I'd only go out for groceries before the sun came up, trying to avoid crowds and being seen. Familiar faces in the neighborhood disappeared. Everyone locked their doors and tried to hide. During the day, I'd peek through a crack in the curtains at any movement outside. If an unfamiliar car drove by slowly, my heart would pound. I even disconnected the doorbell, terrified that a sudden ring in the middle of the night would be the start of the nightmare. At night, any sound, a car engine, a dog barking, would jolt me out of bed, my ears pricked. Terrified that the next sound would be a violent knock on the door and the dreaded word. Immigration. I often lay awake all night. Sometimes just sitting in a dark corner of the living room wrapped in a blanket until dawn. My heart beat, a constant reminder that danger was everywhere. My wife, once a strong and cheerful woman, was being broken down by this life of a startled bird. Her brow was always furrowed, her expression vacant, as if she could be ripped from a nightmare at any moment. At night, she'd often scream and sit bolt upright in bed, trembling, then hug her knees in the corner, too afraid to close her eyes again. When I tried to comfort her, her body would be ice cold. And she'd just whisper, "Are they coming? Are we going to be taken away tomorrow?" All I could do was hold her and repeat, "It's okay, I am here." But the truth was, I had no certainty either. We were both just suffering in the dark. During the day, she couldn't relax for a second. The slightest noise from the street below would send her nervously to the window to peek outside, only breathing a sigh of relief when she saw no law enforcement. After hearing a rumor that a neighbor was arrested after being reported by an acquaintance, she trusted no one. She even made me get rid of our landline and mailbox, terrified any of our information could leak out and lead to our doom. She packed our important documents, some cash, and our children's birth certificates into a duffel bag and hid it under the bed. Twit was her emergency bag, for a friend to take the kids, just in case we get taken away. Watching her go through these desperate motions was like a knife in my heart. But I was powerless to stop it. What hurt me the most was how her attitude toward our children changed. She used to love taking our daughter to the park. Now, the second our daughter went near a window, she'd frantically call her back, scared someone might see her. When our daughter begged to go play outside, she'd refuse. Her voice almost hysterical, "No, it's dangerous out there." A few times, I saw her hiding in the bathroom, crying silently. Her shoulders shaking, I knew her fear had pushed her to the breaking point. The constant stress had aged her. White strands appeared in her once shiny black hair, and her eyes were perpetually red and swollen. I wanted so badly to comfort her, but in the face of this cruel reality, our words felt empty and weak. In this invisible storm, my children didn't understand what was happening at first. My youngest daughter would still hug her favorite doll and ask innocently, "Why can't we go to the park anymore? Where did all my friends go?" Every time I heard these pure questions, my heart felt like it was being pricked by a needle. I'd force a smile, hug her, and say, "It's too hot outside. We'll go when it cools down." She would nod, half understanding, but her bright, dark eyes slowly filled with unease and disappointment. Then my daughter turned 9, and she sensed the strangeness in the air. Terrifying rumors circulated at school. A 4th grader and his dad had been taken away right at their immigration hearing and sent back to Honduras. The story spread through the community, and even the kids were talking about it. That day, my daughter came home from school and asked me nervously, "Dad, are we going to be sent away like them one day?" Looking at her frightened eyes, my throat tightened, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. I just stroked her head and said, "No, that won't happen." But she didn't seem to believe me. She just lowered her head and whispered, "Oh." After that, she became much quieter. She didn't play as carefreely as before. Mostly, she just sat in the corner of her room, hugging her knees and staring into space. Sometimes, my wife and I would push open her door and see this little girl, already with the weight of the world on her shoulders. Their changes broke our hearts. What was crueler was that we couldn't even tell them the real reason. We couldn't explain why they were losing their friends. Why the police would take away good people's moms and dads. We could only repeat empty lies. Everything will be okay. Don't worry, mom and dad are here. But a child's intuition is sharp. No matter how hard we pretended things were normal, she could feel the tension that filled our home. My daughter became timid and clingy, always quietly pulling on my sleeve to ask, "Dad, will you always be with me?" More than once, I heard the sound of her muffled sobs from her room late at night. I would stand outside her door, my own eyes wet, but I didn't dare go in and hold her. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, my own tears would burst out, revealing the despair we were trying so hard to hide. There were so many nights I sat alone in the dark, a question haunting me. We haven't committed a crime. We just want our children to have a life. Why isn't even that allowed? I kept asking myself, as if I were asking society itself. Before my wife and I came to America, we endured hardships few could imagine. We crossed mountains and trekked through a scorching desert, all because poverty and violence in our homeland meant our children had no future. We weren't asking for much, just a chance for our kids to grow up safely on this land of the free. But now, we were being treated like criminals. The truth is, most immigrants like us have done nothing wrong. Only law we've broken is not having legal status. But that one thing has stripped us of our most basic sense of security and forced us into this life of constant fear. I don't understand what's so wrong with working hard, taking care of your family, and fighting for your children's right to survive and get an education. Just because we were born in another country, do we deserve to have our right to pursue happiness taken away? Deep down, I had always believed America was a country of freedom and fairness, a place where dreams could grow. But everything happening now was about to tear that belief to shreds. Whenever I hear someone call us illegals, I feel a deep sense of humiliation and sorrow. Is our love and responsibility for our children illegal? If simply wanting your children to live well, away from violence and poverty, is a crime, then what are we supposed to do? This confusion grew heavier in my heart, crushing me until I could barely breathe. I don't know who can answer me, and I don't know where our future lies. As the news of another acquaintance being arrested came, and the sound of protests on the streets grew, something that had been suppressed inside me for a long time finally ignited. Maybe it was anger, or maybe it was the courage that comes from despair. That morning, I said to my wife, "We can't just wait like this anymore." My wife froze for a second, then she understood. She was silent for a moment, then gave a small nod. We decided to take our children and walk out of the door that had been shut for so long, to join the anti-ICE protest that was underway. That day was the 14th of June, 2025, when millions of people across America took to the streets for a protest codenamed No King's Day. Tens of thousands of demonstrators flooded downtown Los Angeles. As our family nervously squeezed into the crowd, our ears were filled with the deafening roar of chants. "Stop the raids!" Immigrants are welcome. People waved all kinds of signs. Some had crowns with a line crossed through them. Others held up signs that said, "Protest is patriotic." You could see the flags of the United States, Mexico, Guatemala, and El Salvador, all flying together in the sun. I could hardly believe my eyes. To cure so many ordinary people would stand up and support families like ours. The cold loneliness that had been pressing on my chest for so long began to melt away. The procession moved slowly. We held our children's hands tightly and joined the sea of people, shouting out our own anger and our pleas. I heard someone yelling, "Abolish ICE! Reclaim our communities!" Volunteers handed us signs with a Latin phrase, "Pluribus unum," out of many, one. A gray-haired grandmother next to me took my hand and said sincerely, "Thank you for being here, you are not alone." My eyes instantly welled up, my voice was so choked with emotion I couldn't speak. I could only nod. In that moment, for the first time, I felt that this city had not abandoned us, that we were not fighting this battle by ourselves. The march finally reached the federal building downtown. At the entrance, dozens of soldiers, U.S. Marines who had been sent in as reinforcements, formed a human wall in front of us, armed and holding riot shields. Seeing them, I thought the fear in my heart would come rushing back. But to my surprise, I didn't shrink back. The crowd around me erupted in a unified roar. "Shame! Get out of law!" "We don't want you." The sound was earth-shattering. I felt my wife squeeze my hand. It was still trembling, but now, there was a new kind of determination in her eyes. I looked down at my daughter in my arms. Her big, dark eyes were filled with a mix of curiosity and wonder, a nervous excitement as she mimicked the adults and chanted along with the crowd. I leaned down and looked at her, and my heart swelled with a pride I can't describe. Just then, a young voice cut through the noise over a loudspeaker. "We are standing here for our neighbors who are hiding at home, too afraid to come out. This is our democratic duty. If we don't come out because we are afraid, tyranny will take our place." Those powerful words were met with a thunderous cheer from the entire crowd. I felt like something had struck my heart. I looked around at the countless strangers, their faces filled with passion and anger. Everyone was so alive, so strong. I understood then. It was these ordinary, brave people who were giving us back our hope and our dignity. The protest continued into the afternoon. Although the police eventually moved in to disperse the crowd, and the stinging smell of tear gas filled the air, forcing us to retreat, our family felt lighter and more resolute on the way home than we had in years. My wife looked at me and gave me a rare, peaceful smile. My daughter waved her little fist, copying the motions she had learned at the march. And in that moment, I knew we were no longer just scared prey. Hiding in the dark, we had found our voices again. We had reclaimed our dignity and our strength as human beings. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but right now, for the first time in a long time, I can face the future without flinching. At the very least, we have proven one thing. For our children, we will stand up and make our voices heard. And even if the road ahead is still full of hardship and uncertainty, we will never again fall so easily into the silent darkness. Because in this ordinary father's heart, fear, in the end, is no match for the love and responsibility I have for my family. And it is that love and that responsibility that showed me the way forward in the darkest of times.
We left with nothing but the dark and dust, a blanket wrapped around the ones we trust. No words, no tears, just quiet feet, and one small cross where hearts used to meet. Our little girl still dreamed in sleep while we walked silence long and deep. The truck was hot, the air was thin. We held our breath, held pain within. My wife gave all her water away to soothe the child, too weak to say. She whispered, "Mommy, it's too cold." Though desert heat would burn your soul, but we still walk with heads bowed low in a world too fast, too cruel to know. We don't beg, but still we pray to wake and see a kinder day. And even when we bend and break, there's love in every step we take. Still walk, we still walk. asked me once, are we in trouble? I held her close, my voice a rubble. How do you tell a child the truth? That safety's thin and hope is youth. But when the crowds began to rise, I saw the firing, trembling eyes. Now we walk not in disguise, we shout our names into the skies. We are family, we are flame, we are here and we remain. And